Hi guys, welcome back to the Library of Alexandria. And today we're going to talk about Boosh, I Claudius by Robert Graves. So this is, it's not really a read along, except that it kind of is. If you watched my channel 2024 plans or whatever, this is just us continuing kind of chronologically some Roman historical fiction that we started with the Cicero trilogy and then Augustus and then the Cicero trilogy, whichever one came first last year. And so this was the natural progression. I'm reading I Claudius because I didn't think there was a lot of historical fiction about Tiberius and Caligula. I see that there is now, but I'm not going back. And so we decided to read this. We decided to read this. So without wasting any more time, let's get down to business. Let's talk about I Claudius. I thought this book was like written in the 70s when I started reading it, and it's not. It was written in the 30s, so this is almost 100 years old, is this book. And I mean, it kind of shows, like, books aren't written the same way as they were 100 years ago. And really, the biggest unmet expectation is the fact that this book is not about Claudius. It is Robert Graves wrote this book after researching Claudius. He uses the primary sources of the time period with Livia and Suetonius and Tacitus and others. But this is a fiction, but it's written as an autobiography, and so it is just laden with historical detail and accuracy, and the sheer breadth of what he's trying to do is really, really astonishing. But books aren't written the same way as they were 100 years ago, and so it is, I don't know, dry, and it's just not what you would expect from a modern Roman historical fiction novel. But yeah, this isn't about Claudius. It is Claudius writing his autobiography from when he's old. So it's a frame narrative, which I like because I like it when books have, someone writing about the past, and, I like that. If you watch my channel, you know that. So he is emperor in the future, and he's married to Messalina. No, he's married to Agrippina the Younger in the future, which is his last wife. But currently, I mean, this is just from him being as a child growing up in the household of Augustus, or, with Augustus as his grandfather? Yeah, with Augustus as his grandfather. And it's really a book about the reigns, the late reign of Augustus and the reigns of Tiberius and Caligula. I think Tiberius's reign has the most in here, which makes sense because Claudius was Caligula only lived 4 years, and Claudius was not a child basically the entire time that that Tiberius was emperor, unlike Augustus. So it's hard to describe this book because I am the exact audience that this book was intended for. I am already interested in the time period. I already have a foundation of knowledge about the time period, about the Romans and the Julio-Claudian emperors especially. So none of what I read was surprising or hard to follow. Like all of the naming conventions, everyone has the same name because preserving the family line is incredibly important in ancient Rome. And the just sheer amount of names, the amount of characters that come in and come out, that some of which are important, some of which are just minor footnotes in whatever historical source that you're reading. None of that bothered me because I am already familiar with most of it. So if I didn't know something, I just assumed it is in a history that I haven't read, or something that I've forgotten, or that it's just artifice. But all of the people that are in it are real people. There are no invented characters within this. That being said, I can imagine if you have no interest in the time period, or no interest in, like, no previous attachment to whatever's going on, that this would be like a whiff for you, that you wouldn't enjoy it, just because it doesn't actually assume that you don't know anything. It does not assume that you have no knowledge. It just assumes that you'll follow along, that you know enough about it to know what is going on, that the people are famous enough to where you've heard of them. Yeah, and I can see how it could be overwhelming, especially at the beginning. Once it gets rolling, I like it a lot more, and I really love this book. But it's really weird comparing this to Augustus, which is just so written so beautifully and so full of theme, and there's just less of that here. In I Claudius, what I like most about I Claudius is the close look at a political system that is, that has similarities to our own. To watch the machinations of power, the things that people will do to get power, the things that people will do to stay in power, and the cowardice of a populace, or more importantly, those close to people in power, where you see this precipice, this chance, this fulcrum, where there's an opportunity to prevent all of this, and everyone is just too ambitious, egocentric, narcissistic, or cowardly to act on it to where something can be done. And by the time anyone actually stands up to do anything, it's too late. And so watching people be a party to horrible things they know are wrong, things they don't agree with, because they're afraid or power hungry, is, I think, really relevant. I don't think that's changed, and I found it really fascinating to see, to another look in why people who know better will do these awful things and be complicit in, these horrible crimes. I also really like it because this does exactly what I think history should do, and that's give context to what's happening. It is not just a list of things that are happening. Graves does characterize these people. It's not the fine, nuanced characterizations that is in Augustus, but he gives these people personalities. So maybe it's not this epic character work, but he does give them personalities, which makes them memorable. Livia. Graves hates Livia. And that's good, because I also hate Livia, but I don't hate Livia as much as Graves hates Livia. According to Graves, Livia is responsible for every murder that was ever done while she was alive. And while I agree that Livia probably poisoned a whole bunch of people, I don't think she poisoned as many people as Graves says she poisoned. She's just an example. Another great example is Germanicus. Germanicus doesn't get any play anywhere in any source. Germanicus is just there, and we know that Germanicus is beloved, but Germanicus does not really get very much screen time in any of the historical sources. He doesn't get developed as a personality. We don't see a lot from Germanicus. We know what happened to Germanicus and things Germanicus did, but we don't really get to feel like Germanicus is this living, breathing person, unlike, the people who are more at the forefront of the major events like Augustus and Agrippa and Cicero and things like that. So I really love the way Germanicus is portrayed here. I like the contrast that Graves shows between Tiberius and his brother, Drusus, how Tiberius' son, Drusus the Younger, or Castor as they call him, his character arc, because he does have one. I love Posthumus. In this, I really like how Posthumus is portrayed, because Posthumus, Agrippa's youngest son that died, or that was born after Agrippa died, the sources say that Posthumus was sent away for bestial behavior, a bestial nature, or something like that. And that is when I taught Augustus in my class, that's what I had. But here, I like what Graves has added to tell us why Posthumus was banished, what that bestial nature was, the circumstances surrounding that. So a bunch of events like that is really what sold this book for me. And talking about my class, one thing I really loved about this is I had just finished teaching Claudius in my Latin 3 class. I had taught Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, and we just finished Claudius. And so as I was reading this, I would find little bits that brought the characters to life, or added some kind of amusing anecdote or whatever that I would then come in, and my kids would be like, okay, what'd you learn about Claudius? I'd be like, okay, here's your Claudius update or whatever. And I would just read them something from the book. And that engages them even more, like learning what kind of woman Urgalanilla was, or anything like that. So that helped me engage my kids with something we had already talked about, which is really what I like to do. That's how I like to teach history and stuff like that, to make it a narrative, make it a story. And so that helped even more. So I strongly recommend it for that particular aspect of it. Now, one thing, and this is the thing that I liked the least. The thing I liked the least is Graves at the beginning has a foreword saying that he's going to use the modern names of locations, just because people aren't going to know where Lugdunum is, but most people would know where Lyon is, or people aren't going to know, Lutetia, but they'll know Paris. And that's kind of fine. Like, the place names are kind of fine. I kind of get that. I don't understand why any Latin terminology, anything, except for consul. He leaves consul in, but everything else, praetor, aedile, quaestor, praetorian, equites, plebs, like any of that is changed. It's changed. The most egregious of which is gladiator. Like, he doesn't use gladiator. He calls it sword fighter or swordsman. And that's really weird because gladiator, everyone knows what a gladiator is. I understand saying the chasers for secutors and the net wielding swordsman or the net fighter for retiarius. I understand that. But using marketplace for forum and swordsman for gladiator is just a weird choice. Mostly because I don't think people like I don't think the names that he gave him are very clear on what the things are. I know what the Latin words are, but I couldn't always tell what he was talking about based on the English translation he used of what that was. Like I know that the guard were the praetorians. Like I know that, but there were other things like the scouts, capital S scouts. I don't know what those were. I don't know what the equivalent is that he's talking about. So it's very strange. I don't get that choice at all. Maybe that's just what his publisher wanted him to do 100 years ago or whatever. So I find that a little off-putting, and I just think it's a lot. Like I said earlier, the sheer breadth of what he's doing I think is remarkable. He covers from like mid Augustus' reign all the way to his rise to emperor at the end. That is a lot of years, and there are a lot of events, a ton of things that happen. That's probably overwhelming for a lot of people, especially since he doesn't really spend a significant amount of time on any one of them. So it reads more like, I don't know, it reads more like a history book than it does a historical fiction novel, but like a good history book that isn't boring. I know a bunch of people like really dry academic sources, and for whatever various reasons. Like I have friends who like dry academic texts for whatever reason. The only reason that isn't a good reason is because it makes you feel smarter and superior than all the people who don't want to read it. Like, oh, I read this because it's I don't read the others. Like, okay, like you're just an academic douchebag at that point. But it's just not what I prefer. I much prefer a narrative thrust to it, and then like I'm not going to be. I personally will not retain something from a dry and musty tome that is written really densely, so that only that's just not for me. I'll go and I will use those as resources if I need like more in-depth stuff. But that's certainly not the stuff that I'm gonna unload onto my children. Like they're not freaking PhD candidates in the classics. I'm just trying to keep high schoolers interested. So it's less fancy thematic study of Augustus. And it's also not white-knuckling political thriller like the Cicero trilogy. It is something else. But if you are expecting either one of those, and you want it to be either one of those, you'll be disappointed. So this is just something you have to take for what it is and decide whether or not you like it or not. But it is a fabulous learning tool, I think. I think it's also easier to read than than Tacitus or Suetonius, just because of the nature of how ancient writing was. But one thing that really shines through here is how horribly Claudius was treated. Because if you don't know, Claudius, he even calls himself Claudius because he had a stutter, and his head bobbed around, and he drooled, and like his tongue would fat in his mouth, and his stutter was way worse when he was nervous, and he was lame, like he would limp. One of his legs was shorter than the other one, and so he was just this invalid. So his family thought, and they treat him like he's a monster. They treat him like he's an idiot, and he's not. He's actually a brilliant scholar, and Claudius was actually a really good ruler despite having flares of temper. And so watching Claudius not be taken seriously, despite the fact that he has answers, but no one can possibly listen to him because he's the idiot invalid child. So that is one of the reasons I really like Posthumus and Germanicus in this, and their relationship. They're the only ones that like Claudius. But watching people, have various revelations about Claudius's abilities or whatever is actually really good too. So I strongly recommend this. I liked it a lot. I am definitely going to read Claudius the God.
No, God! No, God, please, no!
Which is the second part, which is actually about Claudius's reign, because I already knew way more about Augustus and Tiberius and Caligula than I do about Claudius. All I've read with Claudius's reign are, a couple sources on it. But I've read far less and talked far less about Claudius's reign than any of the other three. So I can't wait to learn more about Claudius's reign, and I'm excited to read that as well. So, yeah, if it does not sound like your thing, I still think it is worth checking out. The BBC did a miniseries in the 70s on I, Claudius with like Patrick Stewart and Derek Jacobi and freaking like Dr. Clarkson from Downton Abbey is Germanicus. That's weird. I don't picture him as Germanicus at all. And I think John Hurt is Caligula or whatever. I don't know. I haven't watched it. I watched clips and they're really good. And the blocking is really good. Like the direction's really good. So if the book doesn't sound like your thing, definitely check that out. Watch the show. And so that way you can still get what's happening with some really good actors. So that is my recommendation for you. I gave I, Claudius 4 stars because I need to talk about star ratings for 2024, but I really enjoyed it. I didn't love it. I didn't like love it, but I did really enjoy it, and I didn't really get trapped, bogged down with it, which, but it's certainly not a new favorite. So I strongly recommend, you get a strong recommendation to read I, Claudius, especially if you're interested in the period. It absolutely should be read. If you're not, just here, listen to this, check out some other reviews, and decide whether or not it's for you. Guys, that is all for me for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, information about my Patreon and Discord is down in the description. I'll see you next time, guys.